Bottom of the hour, you're watching CNN. I'm Brooke Baldwin. Iraq says it killed some 200 hardcore Islamist fighters in airstrikes west of Baghdad. The dead are said to include a commander from the ISIS terrorist group. That strike was outside of Fallujah. Those militants, though, are reported to have captured at least 2 more cities and to have ambushed some of those Iraqi Shiite volunteers who have taken up arms to try to stop them before they get to Baghdad. But the really big news here, which could actually rearrange the whole equation over there, the United States and Iran. Think about it. Longtime foes are talking about joining forces to try to stop the killing. And that would represent a dramatic shift. So you know the whole world is watching this one. Here is John Kerry.
Let's see what Iran might or might not be willing to do before we start making any pronouncements. I think we are open to any constructive process here that could minimize the violence, hold Iraq together, the integrity of the country, and eliminate the presence of outside terrorist forces that are ripping it apart. If Americans obviously feel very powerfully about not putting boots back on the ground in Iraq, so we'll consider what options are available to us. But you cannot allow that march, I think. I mean, it's our basic judgment of most people in the region that you can't just let them run whole hog over the country for any number of reasons.
So you heard him there, Secretary Kerry, saying you cannot have ISIS running wild in Iraq, so you find yourself teaming up with Iran. He did mention airstrikes as another possible option, but again, Iran. Just for good measure, another round of talks over Iran's nuclear program began today in Vienna, and at least one report says a top American diplomat, William J. Burns, might mention Iraq with the Iranians at those talks later this week. Christiane Amanpour with me now live from Washington. She, of course, our chief international correspondent. And Christiane, the U.S. and Iran here, fierce rivals since Iran's Islamic Revolution. What would cooperation even look like as we're talking about Iraq?
Well, that would be the huge question. I don't think anybody envisions the U.S. Air Force being air cover for Iranian Revolutionary Guards on the ground. That doesn't seem to be something that's within the realm of possibility at the moment. So that is a real question. What kind of cooperation would it take? But don't forget that Iran has, in fact, cooperated with the United States before. For instance, just after 9/11, just around when the United States went into Afghanistan to dislodge and defeat al-Qaeda and the Taliban, and also in the post-political solution for Afghanistan. So there has been cooperation there, but by the same token, there's a huge amount of conflict between the U.S. and Iran over Syria. They both back the different sides, but they both have a common interest in making sure some terrorist group like an al-Qaeda offshoot, which ISIS is, gaining even part control and foothold in Iraq. It's a huge big deal, this. It's redrawing borders in the region for the first time, in practically 100 years. And ISIS has been empowered by the festering wound that is Syria, and nothing has been done to stop that. And it's been able to cross border into Iraq and do what it's doing there now.
So as it is this huge deal, and I'm sure you being in Washington, you understand talking to people how this is a big deal. When Americans hear this, they say, wait, hang on a second, we, U.S., talking to Iran? But by the same token, let me ask you this. How do Iran's leaders then explain to their people that they may, and this is the may, be cozying up to, as they have put it before, the great Satan, the U.S.?
Well, I don't think there's any cozying doing here, and both do have some very, very hard challenges in this regard of trying to persuade people that this is in each side's national interest and vital interest at the moment. That's up to the politicians to figure that out. The truth is, though, what actually can be done? That is a hard question that they're going to have to grapple with. I just talked to Iraq's ambassador here to Washington, and he said that we have no time for discussions. Something has to happen right now to halt the advance of ISIS. They don't believe that ISIS can take Baghdad, and not many U.S. commanders believe that either, because Baghdad is so massive, 7 to 9 million people. Now, unfortunately, it has become sectarian, mostly Shiite, certainly in some major parts of the city, and they presume that the defenses of Baghdad will be much, much stronger than they have been in other towns and cities like Mosul, Tikrit, and elsewhere. But you do have this situation that many people are just beginning to wonder whether they're going to have to accept, and that is a de facto end of Iraq as we know it, a partition of Iraq. Kurds, the West, Al-Qaeda-like rump statelet, and then Shia-dominated Baghdad and on down south. And that is in nobody's interest, Brooke.
It's one scenario. It's been thrown out before. And you mentioned Syria a moment ago. And Christiane Amanpour, I mean, talk about irony. Barack Obama, Iran's Rouhani, Syria's Assad. All three of these faces on the screen have the same foe. These ISIS militants who, as you pointed out, crossed from Syria into Iraq, which leads to another bit of irony. These ISIS terrorists are the same guys, calling freedom fighters as long as they're attacking Assad and not our ally Iraq? No?
No, they're not freedom fighters by any stretch of the imagination. ISIS and Al-Qaeda is a threat to everybody, and we've seen it. They are not the freedom fighters. The people who the United States have identified as a moderate opposition are different. Those are the people who the U.S. and others have identified inside Syria who actually are battling ISIS and the jihadi Al-Qaeda-like groups there, which is one reason we're told they haven't made as many inroads against Assad recently, because they've been stretched with no support on a two-front war against the Al-Qaeda ISIS types and trying to battle Assad as well.
But when it comes to ISIS, wouldn't Rouhani, Assad, and the U.S. be on the same side on this one issue?
Yes, because as I said, nobody wants ISIS anywhere, because that is an Al-Qaeda-like existential threat. And that is why, but don't confuse ISIS with the moderate opposition in Syria. That's all I'm saying. And top U.S. commanders are now saying that it may now be the time to start draining that swamp in Syria, because there is no border anymore between that part of Syria and Iraq. And these Al-Qaeda-type groups, ISIS, one of them, is moving across it with impunity. And look what it's done now. Claimed a really large piece of territory as its rump statelet. Whether it can hold on to it or not, we'll have to wait and see. But one option is to really arm and equip the moderate opposition in Syria and see if they can, by force of arms, create some kind of political resolution in Syria and drain the swamp so that these ISIS people don't have any room to maneuver in Syria at least.
Christiane Amanpour, your expertise is invaluable. Thank you so much, especially in this part of the world. And you're in Washington. We all need to make sure we watch Christiane tomorrow night. She will be moderating the CNN Town Hall event with Hillary Clinton. And you can watch that live tomorrow at 5 p.m. with a replay at 9 o'clock Eastern. Do not miss it. Christiane Amanpour. Coming up next, I'll see you in New York. That is what the leader of the terror group causing chaos in Iraq said when he was released from U.S. custody back in 2009. Wolf Blitzer just talked to the man who heard those words. Wolf will join me next.